Hello everyone. So this is just a short sort of demo video then, where we're going to be talking about editing graphs in SPSS, so in the output viewer file. So this is actually some output that's produced from one of your seminar activities, which is the Exploring Your Data, Exploring Your Assumptions seminar. So what we have here is a file that's been split up by a grouping variable, in this case gender. So we have some descriptive statistics then produced for our male participants on a positive effect score. Okay, so that's our sort of the variable that we're looking at here. So we have our descriptive statistics, and then we have some histograms that help us to sort of eyeball the data to see how is it performing, what's the distribution look like, things like that. Obviously, as this stands now, this histogram is not in APA style. We need to edit it to bring it into APA style. So one of the things we need to think about doing is things like removing the background and the border. That's not APA style. We need proper titles, and we need proper axes, labels, things like that. So to edit the graph, what we have to do is double click anywhere on the graph, and it will bring up something called the chart editor. Now there are lots of different ways of sort of doing this and when you're in the chart editor, but we'll just go through some of the versions that I find quickest and easiest to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this title. So if I click on the area, it'll highlight it as a yellow box. Now in APA style, obviously our title doesn't go above the figure, it goes below it, so we need to get rid of this. And I'll say now that in terms of adding a figure caption, I find that easier to do when the image of the graph then is in a Word document. So I usually then I'll prepare everything else for the graph first, then I'll copy and paste it into a Word document, and then I'll add the caption underneath in Word, just because it's easier to use than trying to add a title and move things around in the chart editor here. So you also don't want this. It's good, you need to make sure you keep a note of all of these things so you know which part of your sample this data represents, but we're going to get rid of that. So if you want to get rid of something, what you do is you click on it, it'll bring up a yellow box to highlight what you've selected, and then for the most part, you should be able to just press delete and it should get rid of the thing. So this is important information here that we might want to use in our figure caption somewhere, but again, we wouldn't present it here as a legend. It would go in the figure caption itself. So we'd make a note of that now, and then we'll get rid of that. So let's highlight it again, press delete, and it's got rid of it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I need to adapt these axis titles. So this is my x-axis here. We can see it runs from sort of 0 to 50, or sort of 10 to 50, with increments of 10 as our intervals. So we need to mark out, well, what does this represent? So this is our x-axis. Usually that's your independent variable that goes along the bottom. And that is our positive effect score. We want that actually sort of spaced out and made to look nicer than all of those words jumbled up together. So it needs to be clear to read. So we probably don't need to add any more detail to that here, positive effect score. We can elaborate on that in the figure caption. So we can leave this as frequency. So it might be that you can also change this to something such as number of participants. But technically you can leave it as frequency. Next thing I like to do is get rid of this background and the border. So I'll select, as soon as you sort of selected anywhere on the graph, what you should see is something like this properties editor come up. So we're on fill and border now. I've selected a border, and what I want to do is get rid of that. So here's the option for border, which currently there's a black border. So I'm going to select border, and then this option here is transparent. So basically remove it, and then fill. Currently there's a grey background. We don't want that, so I'm going to click on fill, remove that. So make it transparent, and then apply the changes, and that's what it's going to look like. Okay, so these are all things to help. So if I close this and I'll select somewhere else, what you can see now is that sort of nasty border around the graph has disappeared. So the border around the figure is gone. So there's something else we might want to add to this. We might want to add a distribution curve. It can help us interpret the data and eyeball it. So there's a quick way of doing that, and that's this little button here called Show Distribution Curve. Now when you click on that, it'll automatically apply a normal distribution. Okay, so if we fit that curve to it, we get a little legend telling us that it's normal. We can leave that. And then if you click close, this is what our figure now looks like. Okay. So we might want to remove that. And you can, again, just get rid of that. But what we've got here then is our normal distribution curve. And it helps us get a feel for, is the peak in the center? Has it got symmetrical sides? Is it sort of gradually sloping sides, or is it pointy or very flat? So this will give us an idea of whether it'll help us to decide whether our distribution appears to follow a normal distribution or not. So once we're finished, once we've made all the changes we want to, and there may be other things you want to do in terms of, you know, this is not the only way of writing out these axis labels, that sort of thing. You close that down, and now what I can do is I can right click and for example copy it, and I can go to Word now. What I can do is just paste. Okay, and what I'll do now is I'll add my figure caption. So we know that with a figure caption we've got to have a figure number, and that's whatever order this figure appears in your text as you describe it. And then this is in italics, and then the figure title part shouldn't be in italics, and it needs to give a clear description of what's going on. So in this kind of caption, the sorts of things you might want to think about putting are, well, what are the variables involved? How many participants is this data based on? Are there any key descriptive statistics that need to be presented in there? For example, the mean, the standard deviation. And usually the APA recommends a very brief indication of a key finding. So in this case, it might be that the figure demonstrates slight negative skew or something like that. So, but you need to keep it as concise as possible, but try and include some of those things. Okay. So just to go back over that, the figure number is in italics, but the figure title, as it were, the description of the figure is not in italics, and it's always presented at the bottom of the figure. Okay, so hopefully this short demonstration has been useful. Thank you very much.